app from scratch, or near scratch anyway. Pretty psyched? All right. So in your bootcamp directory, type create-react-app space ThingList, thing-list. I'm calling mine. It's going to be a thing that looks something like this. So it could be a to-do list, or a grocery list, or a list of people, or a list of Pokemon, whatever. It's a list of things. I'm calling mine ThingList generically. You can call yours something else if you like. But go ahead and run create React app space that. It'll take it a minute to install, so go ahead and get started with that. I'll copy and paste this into Slack as well. When you are done with that, attention, important. When you are done with that, do not forget to change into that directory, cd space thing list. Some of you may have noticed, if you don't do that before you type get init, you're going to create one in like your home directory or something, which could be very bad. That could have like all your files. And then if you were to say do something like discard those changes before you commit, well, guess what? You just deleted everything you have. Don't do that. Yeah. When you have done that, Create React App will print out some information for you about some scripts that you can run inside your new project. Things like yarn start, yarn build, etc. You can also run npm start, npm run build. Same thing, but yarn's a little nicer in a lot of respects. So I'm generally going to use the yarn commands for these things. You can go ahead and run yarn start just to check this thing out. Remember, inside your thing list folder. And that should open it in your browser. If yarn isn't found, run npm start instead. And tonight, go ahead and Google how to install yarn. It's easy, but it'll also use a bunch of bandwidth. You may even have to compile it, so it'll take a while, so we won't do it in the middle of class. In the meantime, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, but go ahead and install it tonight. Seth, you might add something like that to the how to install yarn, or a link to yarn. And you should see this. Yarn start or npm start will automatically run a web server on port 3000. And it'll even open it in the browser for you. It'll look like this. It'll have a little spinning SVG. Now I said almost from scratch because we're not quite going to build it from scratch. We do have some static HTML and CSS that we're going to use. And that is out on GitHub under the XTBC 17S1 organization. If you haven't noticed, we're putting everything there. So you can always look there. If we haven't, say, posted a link to our code yet, that's probably where it is. But I'll go ahead and paste this in Slack. So you can clone this or just download it as a zip file. It doesn't matter. We're not going to use the Git history here. So copy it down however you like. It's called ThingList static, notice. Don't download it inside your ThingList folder, though. Download it somewhere else, like a level up from that. Because we're not actually going to use most of these files. We're just going to use them as reference. And we don't want the Git history in there to screw up the Git history in our own. So let's have a look at what Create React App generated inside our ThingList folder. So I'm going to open code inside ThingList. Yeah. So there's a README with a whole bunch of stuff in there. That's the Create React App README. Lots of instructions about how to do stuff. You can also find this by actually going out to the Create React App GitHub page, which is linked there, because we're going to blow away most of this README a little later. You'll see in the root directory, there's package.json. This is a list of all the dependencies. Who's used package management in general before of some one kind or another? What have you used it in? I do, yeah. You've used NPM? What have you used, Adam? Linux stuff, like apt-get and stuff like that? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So most languages have something like that. Most operating systems have something like that. But it gives us a really easy way not just to install code that we didn't write, or maybe there are even packages that we did write, but something that originated outside of this project. It also manages the dependencies of all our dependencies. So if, for example, we add foundation through NPM or yarn, it'll automatically add jQuery. We don't have to worry about downloading that separately or remembering to specify that, because it'll just do it. In our case, the package.json doesn't actually have a whole lot in it. It has React and React DOM, which we know we need in every React project. And, well, we need React DOM in every browser-based React project. And the only other one is React scripts, which is a dev dependency. Dev dependency because you don't need React scripts in order to actually run this, just to do the development. So if we were to deploy this to a server to run, we wouldn't need to include any of that stuff. So it's a dev dependency. And it's not unusual to see more dev dependencies than actual dependencies. So React scripts is where the magic happens. That's what Create React App mostly does. If we look at our NPM or our node modules directory, that's where all that stuff goes. You will need to run npm install or yarn install, by the way. I forgot to mention that. So run yarn install or just plain yarn, or npm install or just plain npm, and it'll actually install the stuff that's specified by package.json. When that's done, you'll see a new file show up, yarn.lock, and node modules will have a whole bunch of stuff in it. So even though we only saw 3 dependencies listed here, that's actually a ton of dependencies, because each of those packages has a bunch. React has surprisingly few. React scripts has a ton. So we don't have to worry about managing all of those. Yarn or NPM just do it for us. Piece of cake. We have a gitignore file, which I think you looked at with Seth a little bit yesterday. And that just tells it stuff that should not be in our Git repository when we create one. And that includes the node modules directory. We don't need to include all of that. Not only is it a ton of stuff, but everyone who downloads our project can just run npm install or yarn install and have the exact same node modules folder we have. Speaking of which, that yarn.lock, that tells us the exact version that got installed for every one of those dependencies. Because some of them are not specific in the version number, like this one. It has this little symbol, which means that it might not be exactly 15.5.4. It could be 15.5.9. So we keep track of exactly which one installed in here, which means that other people, as long as they're using yarn and not npm to do the installation, they'll get exactly the same packages that we got, which reduces a lot of the, hey, it works on my machine issues, because we know everyone has the same version of every file. Inside the public folder, we have a fave icon. The manifest is related to that. And then we have index.html. Index.html, besides a bunch of boilerplate, has our div with an ID of root. And inside app.js, inside the source directory, which is where the meat of our application is, inside app.js, we export app, and index.js imports that along with React and React DOM. And it calls React DOM render, renders that app component, and replaces that root from index.html with that app component. So we'll never touch index.js again, I don't think. App is where the good stuff's going to be. While we're in index.html, you might go ahead and replace the title with ThingList or whatever you're calling your app. And I'll change just one more thing before our initial commit. Inside that source directory, we have app.js, which already imports a CSS file that doesn't have much in it, has a tiny bit. But it also imports this logo, which is an SVG vector graphic. We don't need that. We don't need to add that to our repo. We're not using it. So go ahead and remove that and remove the image tag here that includes it. When you save that file, you should see it disappear over here. Yep. So then we can actually delete logo.svg, and we won't bother to commit it. So then we can make our initial commit. So we can go ahead and type git init dot at the command line. I'm not running it because I've already done it. Remember, make sure you're in the right directory first. You're in your ThingList directory. Not ThingList static, not your home directory, your ThingList directory. Then go ahead and go out to your GitHub. Create a new repository. Name it ThingList or whatever you're calling it. If it's not ThingList, just make sure it's obvious when we go and look at your repositories. After you create it, then you know to copy these two lines. The get remote add line tells it about GitHub. And then git push-u origin master pushes your first commit after you've committed. So after you do git init dot, go ahead and run git add and make your first commit. Initial commit, create React app. Then go ahead and git push-u origin master, in your case, afternoon in mine. So mine is up there. I'll go ahead and send you the link to my afternoon branch. And we have our first commit.